Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to Millionaire Mafia. I'm Jake Chambers, and today we're going to be talking about something that's actually been a request from quite a few people, both recently and over the years. One of the big questions that new or even experienced entrepreneurs or investors are asked is, so what are you reading? What's your top five? What's your top 10? What's your favorite books of all time? So I am a pretty avid reader. Anybody who knows me knows I like to read a lot. Probably read about 60 to 70 books a year, to include audiobooks. And then on top of that, I'm also listening to podcasts and reading articles and all these other things. I'm basically always just trying to read and learn and get and better myself, right? And I think that's really important for especially kind of the leader of the family, which is ultimately our role, right? Or the leader of your group, or the leader of your team, or the leader of your company, right? So it's super important to be well versed and well read. So there's that cliche saying that leaders are readers, right? So and the reason that is because if you have the knowledge in the form of books from the greatest minds that ever lived, that ever walked this planet, and we can read about those people, all the way back, thousands and thousands of years ago, all the way up to current, all these people, right? So there's no better way to become more knowledgeable than reading, right? So I'm going to talk today about my top 10 favorite books. I know a lot of guys do a top 5, and maybe top 10 is too many, but it's really hard to put all the books that I love into just a top 5. I also have a couple bonus books that I like. Didn't quite make the top 10, but are very good books, and they actually are very influential on the way I have actually set up my business and set up my 200-year vision for myself and for my family and my legacy, right? So without further ado, let's get started. All right, so number 1 on the list is called The Richest Man in Babylon. It's written by a man named George Clason. It's a parable. It's a couple hundred pages. It's a really easy read, really fun read, but it's the storyline is the king of Babylon conscripts at the time the wealthiest and most influential man in the entire country or city of Babylon, right? And his goal is for that man to go ahead and teach the king's the 100 most brilliant and upcoming men and scholars in the area in Babylon. The intent of that is so that they would go on and then spread that knowledge of wealth to other individuals, and then that would spread and spread and spread to make Babylon the greatest nation in the world. So you got to remember in this book, in that time, in that era, they used literally coins in purses and stuff that they hang around their belt. So he talks about coin a lot, but the concept is the same, right? So he'll talk about the biggest thing that this man, the richest man in Babylon, teaches is to maintain your coin, to get coin first, actually, to earn coin. However you need to earn coin, earn it in a legal and ethical manner. Earn it, then make that coin grow in the form of interest in businesses and entrepreneurial type ventures. And he talks about a bunch of different options in that book. And then after you've earned it, acquired it, grown it, then keeping that coin not only in your own personal purse, so to speak, but also in your family, right? All right, so number 2 on the list is The Millionaire Next Door. Honestly, this one might be my favorite book of all time. I don't think it's necessarily a big bombshell or anything that's going to teach you. It doesn't give you the nuts and bolts and like how to do something. It's not like, hey, how do I become rich? Maybe not, but this one is more of a mindset, and really it's a lot about, the reason I like it so much is I'm a numbers guy, right? In my company, I run the kind of admin, logistics, the backside, the back channel stuff that keeps a company kind of going. I don't do the sexy stuff. I don't like talking to lenders. I mean, I'll do it. I don't like talking to lenders. I don't like talking to the sellers and dealing with all that kind of in-the-face stuff. I don't mind it. I mean, I can do it, but that's just not my forte. So I like numbers. I like facts and stuff like that. So this is a great one for that. Millionaire Next Door, written by Thomas Stanley, is what it does is he, back in I think the late 90s, 98, he wrote it, but he had focused and he had followed, like, I think it was like a thousand millionaires or something like that. It was a lot over a 20-year period. Wrote down, he interviewed them, and he figured out what they buy, what they pay for watches, what they pay for shoes and clothes and cars, the kind of houses they buy, the locations they buy, kind of the people they're married to, how long they're married, are they married, how many kids they have, what their kids do. And he broke it all down into really, really like detailed numbers and statistics and percentages and things like that. And he calls the millionaires, he calls them, or the people who are wealthy, he calls them PAWs, or prodigious accumulators of wealth. And the way that they live versus what he calls the underaccumulators of wealth, who a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times tend to be the people who have really big earned incomes every year. Doctors, lawyers, all these people who are specialized and make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, how their expenditures and their lifestyle and the way they live tends to be a lot different than the actual millionaires, and it's very interesting to see. Now, his son actually did a new edition of it, and not just a new edition, but like a relook at it about 20 years to the day. There was in 98, or it was in 2018. It's a little bit more relevant as far as terms and terminology and statistics, which is great. His son wrote it because Thomas Stanley, unfortunately, was tragically killed by a drunk driver. But it's really good. Okay. So, number 3, this one is going to be probably a lot more well known by anybody who's in the real estate business. This is probably, I would venture to guess, on at least 90 to 95% of all real estate investors' top 3 books. And I can almost guarantee you that pretty much everyone who's successful has read this book. It's called Rich Dad, Poor Dad by, we all know him, Robert Kiyosaki, right? So Robert Kiyosaki has written quite a few books, and they're all under the Rich Dad title. So I can't just say Rich Dad, Poor Dad. They're all pretty good. He also has an advisor series, so all his CPAs, his attorneys, his insurance providers, his partners wrote books that are all written off or signed off and endorsed by Robert Kiyosaki. But his original book that he wrote was called Rich Dad, Poor Dad: What the Rich Teach Their Kids That the Poor Do Not. And in that book, the reason for the title is, so his poor dad was his actual dad, who was a very, very well-respected and very experienced man in the Hawaiian education system. He was like the superintendent of the entire district or the entire state. Super, super high up there, had a very high income, and had a decent pension when he got out. And his poor dad, so he calls him, then got out and realized the pension wasn't very much, but then he didn't have a whole lot of skills or ability to create wealth outside of living off of the government dole in the form of his pension. Flip that over to his rich dad, who was not his stepdad or anything, but it was actually his best friend Mike's dad. So his best friend Mike's dad, his rich dad, basically he was a high school dropout, so he never graduated high school. So it's a great dichotomy between his poor dad, who was highly educated, never stopped learning in the traditional sense of the word, but his rich dad, who actually gained massive amounts of wealth, didn't even finish high school, let alone college. And what his rich dad did was buy real estate, buy assets, buy businesses that created cash flow that he could then use to leverage into bigger, better, and more extravagant real estate. His rich dad, Mike's dad, ended up being one of the largest owners of hotels in the state of Hawaii, and then was able to pass on tens and hundreds of millions of dollars to his son and then subsequent generations. So it's a really great book. It talks about a lot of mindset stuff. Kiyosaki's a really good writer, right? Not so much in the form of like editing and punctuation and things like that. He's actually pretty upfront about how he's not the best writer, but he's the best-selling author, right? Which is really cool. So he talks about the things he did. He was actually a Marine Corps helicopter pilot in Vietnam, so I can totally relate to a guy like that. And then he talks about his good, bad, and the ugly, which is what I really like about him. He does talk, and I doubt that everything is 100% true in there. I don't think he's lying, but he's selling a book, right? So take it with a grain of salt, but the concepts and the mindset in there is spot on. Okay, so moving on, number 4. I don't have all these books physically in my possession. I lend a lot of these books out. Sometimes I read books. I'll actually physically read them, but they're digital, so I don't have them. But this one is vital as far as mindset. Probably the greatest mindset book that has ever been written. And a lot of people know what this one is. It was written by a man named Napoleon Hill, and it's called Think and Grow Rich, right? So not a huge book, kind of small. It's about 250, 300 pages. It was written in the 1930s by Napoleon Hill. And what he did is he was very intimately close to and in the inner circles of the wealthiest men that ever lived. The Carnegies, the Fords, the Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts, all those people that literally shaped the country as we know it today and created the Industrial Revolution and the assembly line and essentially created capitalism as we now know it. He was in their inner circle, knew them by name, knew them, was literally there, and he followed them for like 30 years. And then he wrote a book on the mindset that these men had and how that mindset, how the way they think affects their wealth that they actually achieve. And it's an awesome book. No matter what you do, whether you want to be a real estate investor, whether you want to start a business, whether you just want to be a better human being, a better dad, a better mom, a better brother, sister, whatever, this is an awesome book. It sounds at first, I just got to think to grow rich or become successful. It sounds a little touchy-feely, kumbaya stuff. It's not. It just do it, read it, and I guarantee you'll really enjoy that. Okay, so next book that I actually have on my possession as well, and this one is number 5 on my list. However, as far as nuts and bolts, this is probably number 1 on my list, right? It's not as relevant today in the form of that I need it as a reference, but this was literally my Bible for the first 8 to 10 months of my investing career when I first got started as an entrepreneur and as a landlord. So this one is called Weekend Millionaires: Secrets to Investing in Real Estate. It's written by Mike Summey and I think his name is Robert. What was his name? Roger Dawson. So what this one is, and I don't know if you can see this, but I've got tabs and notes, and if you look inside this book, I've got it's highlighted and things like that. I don't know if you can see that. There's just like a little random page in here. What is that? They're like little notes and stuff. So this was my Bible. So I got this right after I went under contract on my first rental. So I unfortunately didn't find this book until just after I had negotiated, so to speak, my first deal. And there was some really good negotiating gambits that are in this book that I wish I had known. I don't know if it would have changed the outcome. I still got a really good price on this property, but I think I could have done better. But it is the nuts and bolts for the BRRRR process. The BRRRR process, for those of you who don't know what that is an acronym. So it's B and then 4 R's, RRRR. And it stands for buy, rehab, rent, refinance. So refinance the property and pull your money that you put it back into it back out, and then repeat the process. And that's what BRRRR stands for. I haven't read a better book on the BRRRR process than this one right here. And what I like about it is not just about the burr process. There's tons of books about the burr process. Bigger Pockets, right? They got all these books and stuff like that. This one's better. And the reason I like it, I'm not saying that book isn't great, and that site isn't great. It is good. And there's a lot of good things on there, and a lot of good information. A lot of smart people on there. But what I like about this book, you saw the color of it. It was yellow, right? It's got the big highlighted the blue and the yellow and the greens, and it looks like a For Dummies book, right? It basically is a For Dummies for how to burr a property, specifically how to do the underwriting, how to make sure that you buy the property right. So everybody that knows anything about real estate knows that you make your money when you buy and you realize your profits when you sell. I'll say that again. You make your money when you buy, not when you sell. You realize your profits when you sell. If you buy wrong, you ain't going to make any profits when you sell. If you buy right, you have the opportunity not only make a lot of profits when you sell, but a ton of profits in the form of cash flow during the holding period. And that's what this book is really good about. It also talks about negotiating gambits. It talks about how to not just negotiate to buy the property, but to negotiate with the property management company, with your contractors, with your insurance agents, with the county, as far as state, city and state and stuff, taxes. It's really good. Okay, so the next one isn't real estate or even entrepreneurial focused at all, but I'm a helicopter pilot. I was a Cobra pilot. I like to blow things up and fly really low and really fast. So I would be remiss if in my top 10 I didn't have a helicopter book. Sorry. So the quintessential best helicopter book, in my opinion, and I think in most of people's opinion of all time, is none other than Low Level Hell. So there are a lot of good Vietnam helicopter books, and I am a sucker for Vietnam helicopter pilot books. But Low Level Hell follows a scout pilot initially. He's a OH-6 scout pilot, and the stuff that those guys did in Vietnam, how they even took off with out of that, how they got into the cockpit, let alone took off with the balls that they had on them. It's just unbelievable. And these guys, there's a story in there. I'll just tell you really quick. I'll ruin it a little bit. But there's a story where a guy gets shot down 3 times, and he's going back for his 4th one. And the conversation that he has with his maintenance officer is pretty funny. So that's just a completely different generation, completely different mindset than even than I grew up in. And if you want anybody who hasn't flown or doesn't know anything about aviation and wants to know what being a helicopter pilot is, that's a book to read right there. So Low Level Hell, it's written by Hugh L. Mills. It's a really good book. You're going to read it in a day. If you start it at night, you're probably going to stay up all night because you won't be able to put it down. Awesome. Number 6 on the list is a book that I actually got from the owner of the Professional Investor Guild here in the Pensacola area and throughout the entire Gulf Coast. And they even moved over into Denver, out into onto the East Coast, and out into Texas. Matt Robinson, thank you. Everything you've done for me and for everybody else in the pig. I couldn't be more thankful or more appreciative of it. Hopefully you see this video at some point and have been able to hang in there with me. You're appreciated. I've already said that many times. So, but anyway, he recommended this book at one of his meetings one time at our RIA. RIA stands for Real Estate Investment Association, which is what the pig is. So it's a bunch of us like-minded folks, the movers and shakers of the industry and the local market that meet. We meet once a month, and then we typically go and do our own mastermind and stuff like that afterwards. But anyway, he recommended this book, and it was by Rabbi Daniel Lapin. I don't know how to pronounce it, Lapin. And I'm going to put a link to all of these books in the video. So don't worry about any of that. I'll put all those in there, and I might add some more books down the road. But anyway, book number 7 is called Thou Shalt Prosper. Thou shalt prosper. While they have a negative connotation with the Jews, they are masters at creating and managing wealth, right? So this book, the rabbi goes in and literally talks about the things that they teach their kids, right? How to acquire wealth, where to acquire wealth, who is wealthy, and how where you need, down to where you need to live. Where should you live? How should you behave? Carry yourself. How should your day look? All that kind of stuff breaks it down in order to be wealthy, and not only to gain wealth, but kind of like the richest man in Babylon, how to maintain wealth and make it grow and protect it. So super great book. It looks big and bulky, but it's really good. I can't say anything above it. I'm actually probably going to read it again now that I brought it out. I kind of forgot about it until I started going through this list, and it's a really good book, and I'd love to read it again. All right, so that's a good one. Next book on the list is the longest of all of them, but one of probably the most enjoyable out of all of them for me personally. This one isn't really about being an entrepreneur. This one isn't about mindset. This one isn't about nuts and bolts. So why is it on my list of my top 10 real estate books? Well, this one really affects real estate and the financial system as a whole. And that book is The Creature from Jekyll Island. So if you don't know, Jekyll Island is an island that is off the coast of South Carolina. It was back in the day, back in the 1800s and probably even the 1700s and before, in early 1900s, it was used as a hunting retreat for the elite. We're talking like the Fords, the Carnegies, the biggest, most influential and powerful families in the country. So what happened is what this book is about is the creation of the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve, if you don't know, is a banking cartel that essentially runs our country. It's comprised of 12 regional banks and governors of those banks, and they work not as a entity of the federal government, despite the name federal, and they are not a reserve, despite the name reserve. They are a private bank that the federal government uses to allow them to fund anything the federal government wants, whenever they want it. And they essentially pull the strings on the country, right? And essentially the global economy. Like it or not, believe it or not, don't really care, but it's a good book. I highly recommend you reading it. Just like anything you ever read, whether I say it, whether I believe it or not, you should go in and do your own research. And I've done a lot of research. I've read a lot of books. I believe it to be true, and I believe it to be accurate, and I believe it to be nothing but pure evil, right? I think, unfortunately, it's going to piss you off. It should piss you off, but just because knowledge doesn't always have to be sunshines and unicorns, right? It should incite you to take action, right? Like we talked about in the last video. Okay, so moving on from that one is probably one of the best leadership books I have ever read. I read it and then I listened to the audio. If I had to pick between the two, I would actually get the audio on this one. And the reason is not because of being lazy or whatever, but it's actually read by the authors, and they are super, super great readers. And they also use a lot of like cinematic audio, like audio cuts and effects and things like that. So it really adds to the the emotional side, and you actually get your heart pumping in this one. Anybody in the military may not have read it, but I'm sure you've probably heard of it. You've probably heard of the individuals, but specifically the first name. This book is called Extreme Leadership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. So Jocko and Leif were Navy SEALs. They were both officers. Jocko was the commanding officer of the SEAL battalion company that was out in Ramadi during the initial push of initial invasion of Iraq. and then subsequent deployments afterwards. And then Leif was one of his junior company commanders, or platoon commanders, excuse me, that ran his various platoons, and then they kind of moved up together. So Jocko retired. Leif, I don't believe, ever went to retirement. He might have been stayed as a reservist, but he got out. They both are doing great things on the outside world. And if you want a book on leadership for yourself, and for your family, for running a company, for running a baseball team, a soccer team, if you're a coach, Extreme Leadership is the ultimate end-all be-all book on becoming a leadership and taking that extreme. I said extreme leadership. I'm sorry. It's extreme ownership. So Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Fabian. You guys are probably screaming at me, but that's okay. Anyway, like I said, I'll link that in there. So Extreme Ownership, meaning the success or the failure is 100% up to the leader. Now, so if the unit and the company or the team succeeds, it's because of the leadership, right? Through their leadership, the team succeeded, right? It doesn't mean that you take all the credit. You give the credit to those who did the work. However, it's you are the one that was responsible. If you fail, you are responsible for it all, right? Other people may screw up, but that's because of your failure of leadership, right? And then those individuals below you should be taking extreme ownership of their own life and their own piece of the pie. And so ultimately, the man at the top is responsible, but every other person along the line and in the team should feel that extreme ownership, and that's what makes a great team, and that's what the atmosphere, and that's the team that he created, and that's why his teams, when they were deployed, were so effective and deadly against the enemy. So that's an awesome book. Like I said, I would definitely recommend reading it, but I really recommend listening to it as well. It's a really, really good one. Okay, so like I said, we got 10 books. That was number 9. All right, so number 10. This is the reason I actually started this channel. I had been wanting to do this for a while, but the catalyst for me actually coming up and saying, you know what, I'm going to start this, was a book that was actually recommended to me by my partner, Tyler Austin. We were at our office in Fort Walton. We were having some Angels Envy and a couple cigars, and we were talking about real estate, about business, and our own company as well as a couple other things as well. And we got into talking about this book by Garrett Gunderson. Some of you guys might know him. He owns Wealth Factory, pretty cool company. And he also has written a little bit more well-known book called Killing Sacred Cows. And I'm actually in the middle of reading that one right now. I highly recommend it. But the other one, the book that he wrote, is called What Would the Rockefellers Do? Now, I did a video a couple of days ago. I was in my truck and I was coming back from a rental that I'm looking ready to close here, and I talked about that book. So I'm not going to go into detail about the nitnoid details like I do in that. So I'll link that video in this video in the description so that you can go back and look at the more detailed explanation, because that was really the catalyst for what started me off on my on the way I run my business now, and then starting this channel, and how I got my 200-year vision, for 10 generations down the road, right? Anyway, so what would the Rockefellers do? So just really quick wave tops. It's about the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts, two separate, very wealthy individuals, very smart, very powerful men of the late 1800s and early 1900s. And then what he talks about in there is the difference between the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts and how they passed on their wealth to their generation, and the resultant effect of the way they set their business or set their family up. So that's a really good book. Like I said, I'll link that one in here, so I'll let you go look at that as far as the details. So because of number 10, I have to recommend the bonus, right? So I have 2 bonus books for you that I highly recommend. They're very much related. You could almost read one without the other. I prefer the first one for understanding the concepts a little better. It's a little bit more easy to read. It makes a little bit more sense. I like the graphs, things like that. The second one is more relevant, meaning it's more up to date because things have changed a little bit since the first one was written back in the 90s, and this one is more, I think it's like 2018 or 17. So anyway, the two books, the first one is Becoming Your Own Banker, and the second one is The Case for IBC. IBC being the infinite banking concept. Some people will call it cash flow banking. Some people will call it Becoming Your Own Bank. They're both written by Nelson Nash. He just passed away a year or two ago. He was a very, very well-known Austrian economist, and he wrote these books. And what they are is he had whole life policies, so whole life insurance policies. So the Dave Ramseyites out there are going to hate me for this, right? And I'm not trying to sway one way or the other, but he used whole life policies to fund his investment for his whatever he did, right? Whether it was real estate, whether it was stocks, bonds, whether it was paying for college for his kids, whether it was buying cars or the things that he used to live off of or whatever, right? So really cool what you can do with these whole life policies. I'm actually going to do a completely separate video, at least one. It might end up turning into two, on the whole life policy, whole life insurance, and Becoming Your Own Banker. There's whole life policies, universal life, group life insurance. And then there is actual high cash value and convertible whole life policies that are used to create your own bank and then pass that on to subsequent generations with the advantage essentially backed with a death benefit as well as a disability benefit that's in there. You can open up some pretty cool policies on yourself, your spouse, your kids, your parents, and quite a few other people. So really cool concept. I highly recommend it. I actually have those books. I would show them to you if I could. Like I said, I'm going to link them, but I actually just lent those out to a buddy of mine, and I think he's loving them. So anyway, that is the top 10 books that I have on my favorites list, right? I've got so many books that I love. I'd love to talk to you about all of them. Feel free to comment and ask any questions about other books. Do me a favor, and I want to know what's your top 5, right? If you have more than 5, you have 10, you got 15, 20, fine, put them in there. But if you've watched this channel and you've hung on to this point, I think you owe it to me and you owe it to everybody else here. Give us your top 5. It doesn't even have to be real estate. It doesn't have to be business. It doesn't have to be mindset. Just what's your top 5? I want to know. Also, like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Push the word out there. I want to get more people coming in to learn about this stuff. I want to get more people who have knowledge that can help all of us out and learn more, and that we can benefit and grow with each other to achieve financial wealth and financial independence from the government and anybody else, right? All right, well, hey guys, thanks for joining me. Thanks for hanging in here, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Next video is going to be part 2 of the video I just dropped, which is $3 to $3 million and how I did it on a side gig. So that one's going to be pretty cool. The first part was how I got to basically my financial and emotional and business bottom, how I hit the bottom, rock bottom. You always hear people talk about that. And then this is going to be, part 2 is going to be how I dug my way out and how I got to where I'm at today. I'm going to give you a lot of nuts and bolts. That one might be a little bit longer. And I'm going to break those out into subsequent videos to focus on specific things that I did on those properties and on those business decisions. But anyway, thanks again for joining us. Again, if you haven't already subscribed, go ahead and do that. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one. As always, here's to your wealth, guys.